a master promoter. He was just an absolutely great promoter. Harvey wasn't around the racetrack a lot in the 50s. It was a United racetrack into the mid-50s before John Whitehouse and other guys took it somewhere else.
I don't think we can underestimate how huge United was in the 60s into the early 70s. It was huge. People didn't really think that much about NASCAR in that day. Stafford was a NASCAR track. They ran Saturdays. Thompson went off and on, I think. But United was it. That was the place to compete with pretty much. And they had a lot of tracks at one time.
In a period when stock car racing everywhere, short track racing was getting more professional, I think Harvey understood that at some of these smaller tracks, you didn't necessarily have to be that way. You know, if you were just going for local people, it was almost good to have that carnival atmosphere, you know, show them something that they couldn't see in their normal lives.
My understanding was that Harvey would act, if you, let's say there was a fight on the front straightaway or something like that, afterwards Harvey might actually pass the guys $50 just and say, that's pretty good, keep it up, you know, or something to that effect.
Two guys fought on the front straightaway, he'd fine them each $50 and then give them $75 later, you know, because he knew that even though you didn't necessarily want to encourage a lot of fights, you know, he knew that if two guys got in a little bit of a brawl, that all the fans were going to go home talking about it, and they'd tell their friends and bring more people next week.
Staging the fights and carrying on the deal with the West Haven Waterbury battles at West Haven, and then the Connecticut Massachusetts deals at Riverside Park.
He understood that short track racing is not about making money, it's about entertaining the spectators, having a show.
One of the things that Harvey was brilliant at was keeping these fans from different areas really in love with the drivers from that area. You know, he had a Waterbury gang of drivers, and so everybody from Waterbury had to come and root for, you know, Jack Membrino and people like that. And he had a West Haven gang, West Haven/New Haven gang that all rooted for Billy Greco. When he had Riverside Park, he had the Enfield gang, which was those guys from up there, Bobby Stefanik and that bunch.
United was probably associated more with Riverside than any place else, as far as I understand it.
Harvey was usually at the park Saturday night.
They opened up before the Speedbowl, and I loved going up there to watch. And I thought, to this day, I thought they had some of the best, nicest field of cars.
They were getting 60 cars, I think, on a Saturday. They was huge for a while there, and a lot of drivers from different tracks went to that racetrack.
Harvey came from Riverside Park. He had been around a long time. He was probably one of the better promoters in helping the teams. Somebody wrecked on a Saturday night, he'd be there Monday morning with a few bucks to say, hey, look, you know, we got to get your car back. What do you need? You know, you need suspension? Do you need a motor? And he was truly a pioneer in that respect.
If you look at the whole history of racing in New England, Harvey Tattersall is right there with the best promoters ever. He was a genius at promoting the sport. When he came to Waterford there at the end, he was no longer the genius that he used to be.
Harvey had been around for a long time, you know, and I think that, you know, when he finally landed at the Speedbowl, it was, you know, pretty much the end of, you know, the tail end of his racing career.
It was kind of in the twilight of his career.
Harvey was definitely old school.
Harvey Tattersall was a tough man.
A couple of drivers' meetings early on with our rules meetings with my dad. I thought he was a prick, you know. You know, I was young, and he was just a guy who was, you know, he was bringing his United sanction. Here we go, this is what we're doing. You're crazy, I don't want to hear that. And I said, man, this guy's tough, you know.
A lot of people really didn't care for Harvey Tattersall, and I think because they didn't know him. But as a racer and a promoter, he was just super.
He had come to odds with Ed Carroll at Riverside Park because he had the exclusive at Riverside, and something happened up there. I don't even know what happened up there, but they were on the outs, so Harvey was out on his own.
There was a driver's strike at Riverside, which is, I think, how Harvey lost the track, and then NASCAR came in.
The old United circuit was just getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and NASCAR came into Riverside, and so that was out of his sphere.
Waterford was the last track he ran, pretty much.
It started out being that you had to belong to a club, an organization, a United organization. So that was the first time we had to get a driver's license or membership license. And then, but they were all professional, all the staff had uniforms, and I mean, you could pick out the staff and that.
They actually had real tech inspectors, you know, First time I ever seen you had to actually pad your roll cages and stuff like that, and guys with gauges and stuff to check cubic inches, where with White House it had really pretty much nothing.
You know, I mean, you've had a car with 4 wheels on it, basically you run, you know. That's not White House, but yeah, you had rules and regulations and safety deals.
You know, Harvey was a great guy. He tried to run a great program.
He'd been around racing for a long time. He knew how to run races, promote races, make money, try to really keep the competitors happy, tried to keep the costs down, believe it or not. Everybody always wanted to have a little bit more of something, and he basically tried to keep it down because he knew he couldn't afford to keep paying more and more. And I remember a time very vividly when we were asking for more money, and he said, look, if I didn't pay you at all next week, you'd all still be here. And that still sticks with me to this day.
The tire rules they all tried to get cheap tires. Harvey bought a bunch of Indy car tires. They were like 4 or 5 year old tires, hard as a rock, and that was the track tire. You had to run them. They were cheap. They were like $70 a piece, and we heard he bought them for like 15 or something, you know. And it was very hard to set a car up with those because they were so inconsistent and old and stuff. But it was interesting to try to set a car up with them.
Harvey was, older guy at that point. He had a few guys around him that, were helping to keep it go, like John Janasitis.
John would say, I need you to shoot a picture for me. And so I'd say, okay, well, you guys stand up here on the grandstand, and I'll go down there and shoot with my zoom lens, and I get a nice shot. But John, yes, did indeed seem to be Harvey's right-hand man. I think he was the announcer.
He actually was, as an announcer, was my idol. His wife Ruth ran the souvenir stand. I was still a kid when, he was going. So, the souvenir stand was a big thing. But, he had a great voice.
I remember one of the things particular to the era were that when they were going to have a heat race, the cars would stop on the track, and you had the numbers painted onto the track, and the cars would stop there. This is one of Janasitis' things that he wanted me to do, was to have the guy pull the window net up so you could see inside the car when you shot the photo. And that was a transitional era between the modern era and the era of the past. So the full-face helmets were starting to come in. He actually had me have the guys take their full-face helmet off for the picture. And he liked the still shots. He didn't want the action shots for the most part. And John was a particular guy.
Well, John Janasitis, who came with Harvey from Riverside Park, he was kind of a prominent fixture around there, and he had aspirations of someday taking over the Waterford Speedboat.
I think Harvey was probably as sharp as he ever was. It's just that the times had passed him by, because a lot of the smaller tracks where his kind of promotion was a hit, a lot of those places were dying. Racing had gone in another direction, and the places where a guy like him could really make hay, they weren't there anymore.